Hello, everyone. Today we have Tracy Reilly with us from Catholic Charities. She is going to be talking with us about working with older youth as CASAs. So, Tracy, it's all you.
Good morning, and thank you for taking a little bit of time for listening to a program that I am like crazy passionate about. So my name is Tracy, and I work with Catholic Charities. We have two offices. One is in Waukegan, and I have another office in Bucktown, in Chicago. With that being said, though, our offices mean nothing because we serve our youth in regards to where they want to live. So I'm sure many of you I've seen in CASA of McHenry. We have young adults in Kankakee, in Rockford, in Will County, in Ottawa, so our scope is huge. And so my name is Tracy, and I am the program supervisor for Catholic Charities Independent Living Program. And so this is what when I talk to the people about older youth in care, I've got a little bit of an audience because this is your passion as well, is that you guys are serving kids who need us, right? But I usually start off by saying if you remember being launched into the world when you were 18, or if you've had a kid that you've launched on your own. I've had both experiences, and personally, I remember feeling scared. I mean, so excited, but in the back of my head, like a little bit nervous, right? But I had like my mom and dad to call, and my young adults that we work with don't have that person, so we just become the parents to so many young adults in the world. So let me talk to you a little bit about my program. Sherry, you said I could share, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we service youth in care. Let me see if I can find my little piece of paper here. It would work too perfectly if I already had it up. Okay, let me put this down. I'm so sorry. I am so bad at this, you guys. So I'm going to talk while I'm looking, if that's okay with you guys. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of independent living. So independent living is a placement option for youth in care. Independent living is an option for youth in care who are between the ages of 18 and 21. Their goal needs to be independence. The court set goal needs to be independence. And so the mini scope of our program is we work with these young adults to prepare them with the skills to face the world when they turn 21. I think a lot of us feel like kids exit care when they turn 18, but there's certain adults where if they're still going to benefit from services, the judges can do an extension order, which makes them eligible for our program. I know there's some other young adults who do get that extension and maybe remain in foster care or, with their previous provider. But we are a program that services youth in care between the ages of 18 and 21. And now I'm feeling very sad. Oh, here we go. All right, people, can we see this?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So Catholic Charities Independent Living. So as I said before, we have two different offices, but you do not need to take note of any of this because I've worked with Sherry for probably on 7 or 8 cases over the past many, many years. So the independent living program, we service, as I said, youth in care between the ages of 18 and 21. So we're in Lake, we're in Cook, we're in Collier counties. We really, as we're preparing them for independence, we want them to live where they're going to have support when we step back, right? So we don't choose the young adults community. We let them choose where they're going to be surrounded by a support. And then our goal is to help enhance that support for these young adults. The goal of our program is to equip these young adults with the skills to achieve self-sufficiency. Program eligibility. So they do have specific guidelines of what you need to be eligible for our program. And as I did mention briefly before, is you do need to have a court set goal of independence. And I think, Sherry, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think the judge can change that goal. I think as young as 14.
It's what I'm hearing. Is
Okay,
14.
okay. And I think that's usually like when return home is ruled out. And that's the age where these young adults can consent, these kids consent to where they want adoption or permanent or guardianship. And if they don't, a lot of times they choose independence. And then that's where they work towards meeting that. And it might not be with their forever family, but sometimes they stick with foster parents that you remain good supports to them. So the age, you have to be 18. Your goal needs to be independence, and you're supposed to have your high school diploma and GED or GED. And we ask that the young adults are employed a minimum of 20 hours per week. So there is a little bit of wiggle room with this, you guys. Someone called me the other day and said, you know what, Tracy, I have a kid and school's just not their jam. But, you know, he's working 40 hours a week at Walmart and he's 19. And I said, you know what, let's do it. You know, I'm sure you find with the young adults that you work with is I call it creative case management. You know, you kind of have to do what you need to do to look at this kid's best interest and how we're going to meet their personal goals. So we provide intense case management, obviously advocacy. We help our kids enroll in school if they want, job training skills, financial literacy, budgeting. We help them, you know, find safe and appropriate housing. So when they were referred to our program, and I'll go back in a minute to talk about if you guys have any young adults that you think would benefit from a program like this, what the caseworkers you're currently working with now, what referring them would look like, okay? But so when we get a referral, I'll meet with the young adult and basically say, tell me your supports and tell me when you look at being out on your own, where you see yourself. And so let's just pretend I have a young adult who wants to stay in Waukegan. And so basically what we do is we do an intake. And we want to make sure that the services, if they're in current services, that we're going to be able to bridge them over, right? We don't need to why break? Like why stop doing what's working, right? And so we sometimes need to be creative in regards to keeping those services. But when I'm saying services, I'm kind of talking about if we have a parenting team, right? Just to make sure that those parenting resources are going to be able to follow the young adult. Let's say that they were in some type of therapy with Art and Shore. We'll reach out to Art and Shore and see if we can set up a contract to keep that same therapist. Because kids at our age, when they're this age, if they still want therapy, that really means something. And so I will do anything in my power to make sure that they can continue to receive that support. So what we do is we place young adults in their own apartments. And we can assist them with up to $852 in rent, and they get a small board payment with that as well. Let me see what this next page says. Tell me if I'm going too fast. So basically, this is what the benefits of joining the independent living program. So we place the young adults in apartments, again, in the community that they define where they want to be. You know, but if someone is going to tell me in Waukegan they want to live on George Street, you know, that's not safe. And so I obviously, you know what I mean, would not support that, because I also have to put workers in that community. But we would have a conversation about that and see what we could make that look like. We furnish the apartments. They additionally get a $200 in startup funds to help, you know, kind of get bath towels and stuff like that. I have found with a couple of young adults that I've placed from McHenry County with CASAs is that we find real quick that that's $200. If you've ever even been to Walmart, you can't leave anything with anything in your hands for $200. So we've been able to, you know, I know Sherry has been able to tap some resources for our young adults to get them, you know, other supports as well to help them get all set up in their apartment. So when they first move in, we are required to visit these young adults once a week. And that's just to make sure, you know, they've got their bills in their name. They're navigating, taking a couple steps in this world called adulting in the right direction, right? So we're in the house weekly. After that, our contract says a minimum of twice a month. I still have some kids that it's been 15 months and we still see weekly. It's just, that's what they need, right? So we're going to make it happen. I have other kids who they got this, you know, and it's twice a month. So that's a little bit what the case management looks like. We do pretty an intense case management. We spend a lot on budgeting. You know, I'm in my 50s and budgeting it ain't an easy gig. So especially with our young impulsive people, that's not usually their specialty. We offer a program called Financial Literacy, and it's an 8-hour course that young adults are. I'm writing myself a note so I can explain that DSIP process. Sherry, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's an 8-hour course. All of my staff are certified trainers because I know a lot of agencies offer groups, but all of my young adults are so scattered that all of my staff are trained so they can do a one-on-one training with them when it comes to that. We do budgeting, we do life skills, we do referrals to just anything you can dream of, helping the young adults enroll in school if that's what they want to do, is go for a higher level of education and whatnot. Now let me talk to you a little bit about their financial benefits. This is what the beautiful thing about our program is. I have a young adult who Sherry's familiar with, and in a year and a half, he's already saved $17,000 that he will get when he's 21. So I know. So each of these young adults are eligible to receive a monthly board payment of $852. I mean, I'm sorry, a monthly rent allotment of $852 and a board payment of $654 to help them kind of meet their needs. Okay. And
so
that would be.
Can you explain board payment a little more?
Like a board payment is to kind of help them meet their needs. So it's like their allowance. So it's supposed to help them keep their lights on, keep food in their fridge, pay for their gas or a bus card, you know, just kind of the everyday bills that they encounter. My young adults learn very quickly that you cannot live off of $654 and that you really have to work. Because unfortunately, some young adults that enter our program, they know they need to work to get into my program, and then they move into their apartment and they quit their job because they have their own pad, and so they've reached their goal. And then they very quickly realize it's really hard to live off of $652. But this is what they start off with, okay? And so what we do is we have a forced savings account. And the forced savings account is to wean these kids off of being dependent on the department, okay? So if we kept on paying their rent for a year and 2 years, all the way up until they turn 21, we're really not helping them for when they turn 21, because all of a sudden it would be such a shock to have to take over this bill. So what we have is a forced savings account based on the age. So let's say someone comes to me I would love when they come to me at 19, but that doesn't happen very often. Let's say they just came at 19 and a half. So immediately we are going to start taking 50% of this, you guys, and placing it into a savings account for them for when they emancipate. Okay. And then every quarter as they age, we take more, and as you can see, higher and higher percentages and stuff it away for them. 3 months in a perfect world, this is how it looks. But again, every one of our young adults is different, and some young adults we can't be this stringent on because we can't have them living on the corner. But this is what happens in a perfect world. And the goal of our program is 3 months before they turn 21, we would like to see them 100% financially responsible for themselves. And so then what happens is when they turn 21, then they are able to receive this funds. I know I'm talking very fast. You know, that's just kind of like what our program looks like in a nutshell. Now, if you are ever working with a young adult who's, 18, and maybe has a diploma or GED, I really need them working, and you think this is a program that they would benefit from, the caseworker that you're working with would need to submit a referral. So I think you would ask them to submit, oh wait, I'm going to say, keep this right here, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Is to submit a referral for independent living. They should know how to do that. If they don't, I'm so happy to provide everyone with my contact information and can kind of walk them through the process. They should know how to do it because DCFS has really recently put a pretty big focus on our older youth in care, which I am so thankful for because they were often really forgotten. And so we do talk a lot. The day that these kids enter my program, we do start talking about when they turn 21, because that's our goal. And because we need to make up a plan that's their plan, not Tracy's plan, what their plan is and what goals they want to achieve for when they turn 21. So DCFS has a countdown to 21 program, and that starts when it used to be called DSIPs, and they do a discharge staffing at age 19. And at this discharge staffing at age 19, they say, okay, I know it's going to be 2 years, but what are these goals that you want to see happen before you turn 21? And then they have the same meeting again. If you have a baby, they'll do it at 20.3, and then everyone does it at 20.9. So it's really to talk about what we need to get taken care of before you turn 21. With that being said, if you are working with a young adult and they do have one of these C21s coming up, sure, I didn't know if you knew this, they can do the ILO referral. The caseworker wouldn't have to go through doing a different one. If they have a discharge staffing at age 19, I'm assuming the facilitators, if they see they're pretty pulled together, they'll go ahead and shoot a referral.
And is that like an ACR for a 19-year-old? Is that what that kind of thing is?
It does look a little bit like that. It's a little bit different. What they have is these trained throughout the state. They're called facilitators. And so what we do is we pull the team together. We have the caseworker involved. This caseworker supervisor is supposed to be involved. We have the young adult involved. The GAL is supposed to be there. I always invite my CASAs. And we sit around the table and we just basically say, you know what, Sherry, this is your meeting. 21 sounds really far, but we want to talk about 5 things. And we'll say, let's talk about school. What do you think your goals are to accomplish before you turn 21 in regards to education? And you could just be like, nothing. And we're like, fair enough. And then let's just talk about housing. What do you want that to look like? Where do you see yourself? Are you going to still be with your auntie? Do you think you would like an ILO where they will transition you to independence? So they kind of put it out there to get these kids thinking. And everyone leaves with a plan, and everyone has specific assignments. The caseworker should have assignments. The young adult will have assignments, So it's just kind of starting that roadmap to what your steps you need to take if you want to accomplish what you want your situation to be at when you're turning 21.
Okay. So it's a meeting that occurs when a child turns 19. If
that is correct. Statewide. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're in independent living. It doesn't matter if they're in foster care.
Okay.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. It's statewide.
Okay.
No matter where you're living, they do it. And they can also refer to our program. And then there are so many resources available to young adults, even if they're not in independent living. DCFS has an employment incentive program. And if you have a young adult that you're working with that is working 20 hours a week, their case manager can do a referral, and they automatically get paid $168 every month for working 80 hours a week, which I think is a pretty beautiful thing.
80 hours a week?
Yep, they only have to work 20 hours a week.
Oh, 80 hours a month.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, 80 hours a month. We only need them to work 80 hours a week.
Okay.
Whoops, sorry about that, guys.
You can keep your 168.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, yeah, no thanks. There's an employment incentive program for our young adults. There's another program called Youth in College. Our goal is we have a lot of young adults that are in school that are in our program. And DCFS has a program that they also pay our young adults to go to school, and they can get a stipend of $1,600 a month for being a full-time student. And they can receive that all the way up until they're 26 years old. So that's a pretty cool program. Sherry, I have flyers on all of those. All this stuff that our older youth are eligible for, that I'm so happy to share it with you if that would be helpful.
Do you have them electronically?
Yeah, I'll email them to you.
Perfect. Yes.
I'll go ahead and
everybody gets them. Yeah.
There's housing advocacy for these young adults. There's so much money out there for our older youth in care that I think unless you work with older youth in care, you just don't even know it's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you find that many of the kids are like, no, I don't need the money. I don't want to do the program?
Oh, yeah. I'll be like,
Really?
you know what it takes? I'll say to them, and I'm not sure how many of you guys know 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds, but you want to because I'll say, you know what it takes, to get the first check, you guys, it does take 6 weeks. And they're like, screw that. I don't want to sign up. And I'm like, okay. Makes no sense, but sometimes that's how they roll. Yeah, so it's a good program. It's called the Employment Incentive Program. It's a one-page application that the caseworker can submit in a jiffy. I know I kind of went fast. Tell me what type of questions everyone has.
Anybody else want to pop in with anything? So how many kids do you tend to have in your caseload kind of thing? Is it lots of kids?
So each of per contract, each of my workers can carry 10.
Okay.
10 is hard just due to them being in so many different places. But we can serve up to 10 each worker, and I only have 2 workers right now.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So, when I was working with a young man, and he's currently living in TLP.
Okay.
And in your situation, or the situation that you're offering up here, is there anybody living with him? Is there
No. So
totally independent? You just do a drop by every now and again?
Correct. And now, Phil, this is a great question, because I should have talked about where our referrals come from. We get a lot of referrals from TLPs. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what a TLP is, but a TLP is a transitional living program. Okay. And this is for the young adults who need a little bit more structure than that they are getting from in a foster care placement. So typically a TLP, Philip, where's your TLP?
Calumet.
Okay. So usually a TLP kind of, it's a broken, it's a facility. Sometimes they're like an apartment building where these young adults each have their own room, or they have a roommate, but there's a staff there 24/7. Okay. There's different things that they're supposed to be doing while they're there. And then it should be, Philip, the goal for them to progress these kids that they can come to independent living. Hopefully they can provide those missing steps to where, you know what, yes, they will be okay in their apartment on their own.
But what intrigues me is that
TLP is, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I stepped on your, what intrigues me is that end goal is he wants to live with mom, but this gives him a little more independence.
Yeah.
There are some other folks in that dynamic, in that home dynamic. And this gives, so he could be in the area with mom, because mom, I think she lives in McHenry County or just on the other side of
Okay.
on Lake County or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And close enough to his mother and his stepbrother, and yet have his own space.
Correct.
But we'll see. We'll see how
How old is
grown
he?
up he is.
How old
He's
is he?
18.
He's 18?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. You know, I've gotten a couple kids at the age of 18 and it was fantastic because we
Yeah.
had 3 years to work so hard with these kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
18 is still kind of young.
Well, it's
but-
tough for him because he missed a lot of school, so
Yeah.
he's got some catching up to do. And holding down a job and doing the school thing, it's 20
It's hard.
hours is hard.
It is so hard. You know what? But you know what? He's so fortunate to have you behind him to be like, you got this, right? It's interesting that you bring that up though, because you know what I learned in a meeting the other day is no matter what a lot of our young adults went through, 70% of young adults in the state of Illinois end up back with their parents. So, but you know what? If that's the case, at least they're going back with like the strength, right? The resources and the knowledge to be able to, well, hopefully their parents are in a better place. We can only hope, right?
Yeah.
But when that's not the case, at least they're going to go back with some skills, right? And able to like survive the situation. Because you know what, our program is beautiful. And if it was to come out like roses as that it's written, it would be a beautiful thing. But you know what, we have a lot of kids that they turn 21 and they don't have a job. You know, they can't pay that rent on their own. And so then that's when we do our creative case management and say, what's this going to look like for you? And it's going to be like, you know what, I'm moving to the other side of McHenry and I'm going to stay with my mom, you know? And then so we'll just be, but we're not talking about this at 20.9 months old. We're talking about this when they come in the door at 19, right?
Yeah.
We always have a plan C and D, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
But that's a valid point. You know, that's his end goal.
And so on the work, on the employment side, what resources, that's not kind of your area, right? Does they have to rely on their DCFS person to help them out with that, or they just out finding jobs on their own?
You know what, they're supposed to come to us with a job. And as I said before, they usually quit when they come to us. You know, on the realistic side of things, you know, I mean, we kind of know how these young adults roll. I have amazing workers. I don't know about other ILOs in the program. DCFS does have, and you said he's in Calumet City.
Yeah.
They have 2 or 3 programs that you can do virtually that are job placement programs. They will help them. It's like a 5-week program and it's for statewide, or a 6-week program. They get paid to go. It's on maintaining jobs. It's on creating a resume, and just teaching those skills.
Yeah.
So one of those programs might be a good idea for your young man. Does he have his GED?
No.
Is he with a decent TLP? I just want to ask honestly.
I was there. It's actually okay. I mean, it's pretty okay. The gal that's running the joint, she's tough but soft.
Yeah.
I mean, she's nice, but she's not going to let you slide.
Yeah, they got expectations, you know.
Yeah, and she's not there all day though. Then she's gone at 4 o'clock, and then they have curfew at midnight, but they have to sign in and out.
Do you know what agency it is?
I do not.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Because there's always some good ones and some like.
Yeah, and the neighborhood was really nice. I mean, not
Good. Okay.
really nice, but I mean, it was. I kind of know the area, and it's a kind of a rough area, but this was calm.
You know, with these programs, when they're running it great, these kids are going to leave with some skills. You know, they're going to leave with like time management, hopefully they're giving them these skills that when they're ready to step down into a least restrictive setting, hopefully they've gotten some of these skills before they've come to ILO. You know what I mean? I get a lot of referrals from TLPs. I also get referrals from foster care. The young adults that are still in care when they're 18 and 21 years old, it's usually because there's some stuff going on. A lot of our young adults are failed adoptions, or they never reached permanency, and because they've got some stuff going on. But that's kind of what we anticipate, and we just look at every kid to be like, what can we do to make this work for you? You know, we'll run just as fast as our kids, but we don't run faster we can't want it more than them, right? Because then we're doing them no justice.
So when you are referred someone, you help them find housing. Is it difficult to find an apartment or something?
What, the last 2 years, it's really, really been a strain. The landlords kind of own the world right now. They are asking our young adults, and when we get kids at 18 and 19, they're asking for credit scores. And 18 and 19-year-olds typically don't have credit scores. However, I'm trying to, in the main counties that I'm in, I'm trying to build up my repertoire with landlords, right? Because we want to say, hi, I've got this 19-year-old. Let him move in. I've got no credit check. He doesn't make 3 times the income. So it's kind of a stretch to get someone to buy into it. So finding an apartment is a challenge. And I have found that your program has helped me phenomenally when it's coming to tracking things down for these young adults that I've been working with.
And by that, do you mean that CASAs have reached out to landlords and said, are you interested? Would you be willing to talk about this or something like that?
Correct. Okay. So Sherry, that was a good question. We send our young adults each get what's called as a benefits letter once they're accepted into our program. And it basically says, we're good for our money. We will pay up to $852 a month for Sherry Dodge and then we write on there until your 21st birthday. The tricky part is, of course, it's been through my legal, and there's a caveat in there that says for some reason, they're no longer in our program, they're responsible, because we've had kids end up in jail or,
Yeah.
And we're not on the lease.
Okay. Now, are they allowed to have a roommate?
Very good question. Yes, they are allowed to have a roommate. And the good thing about that is that it makes things a little bit more affordable. And sometimes it makes things a little bit more doable. It's kind of scary getting out there and being in your own apartment, right? And sometimes if you have a roommate, usually when I do have a young adult with a roommate, I have to have a conversation and be like, do they know you're a youth in care, right? Because they need to be able to let me in your house, and all of these things. I had one kid who had a roommate, and I was just his auntie, and I was fine with that. They don't need to know his business. And he'd be like, your aunt's here again. And I'm like, and that worked out because we're not gonna, violate their comfort levels. But that's a good question. Yes, they are allowed to have roommates.
Do you help them screen those roommates for anybody who might be not good for their money?
Yeah, we try.
Okay.
I've had a couple kids get screwed. But you know what? Sometimes I learned that when I was 19, is that you think living with your best friend is just going to be the greatest thing alive, and then you two live together, and it's not the greatest thing alive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she kind of learned that the hard way. And I said it happened to me too.
Yeah.
And now they're best friends again, and they just don't live together.
Very good. And when it comes to roommates, what if they propose a girlfriend as a roommate or a boyfriend or any kind of paramour?
That's what they cannot do. That's one thing that they cannot do.
Okay.
And that is, because we've always had too many people, if it's a 2-bedroom and that other person, okay, so let's say they have a roommate and the rent is $800. We're only gonna pay 400, right? And that other person's gonna pay for their room.
Right. Okay.
And so, no, DCFS does not allow for it to be your girlfriend or boyfriend.
All right.
I was gonna. So that's one thing I did want to say is when we do have these young adults, which is very rare, find an apartment under that 850 threshold, that difference goes into their savings account. Okay. So let's say, their rent was only $500 because they had a roommate. That extra $325 every month will go into their savings account.
So they're guaranteed a whole 852
Correct.
somewhere.
Correct. Now, if their rent is over the 852, they can pay the difference on their own if they have a decent job. You know, we just kind of look at it on a case by case basis and budget with them to see what it's really going to look like with you paying that.
And if they're going to school, they also need to do 20 hours of employment. Is that what you're?
Yeah, you know what? Because they realize that they can't live off that board payment.
Right.
It's just too small.
Okay.
Yeah, they're supposed to. In a perfect world, yes, yes, yes.
Do you have kids in the ILO who are also in the youth and college program?
Now they cannot be in both.
Okay.
So that they can leave ILO and at 21 and transition to youth and college,
Got
but
it.
you can't be in ILO and in youth and college
Okay.
at the same time.
All right. What other questions do you guys have? This has become everything Sherry wants to know.
Tracy, where does the funding come from for all of these different, like the board funding and the rental? Where does all of that come from?
DCFS.
Okay.
It would be the same as if a young adult was in foster care. You know, the foster parent gets a board payment and the kid gets an allowance.
So there aren't any other revenue streams that support this?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if I wanted to talk to my person about this, and I think what I would do is say, hey, do you still really want to move with mom, or would you consider doing something like this? And then if they say, well, that sounds interesting, what's that all take? Then my next step would talk to his or her DCFS person.
Correct. Yeah, their caseworker you would have a conversation with. When does he make 19?
I should know that, but I don't.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Does he have his
Probably
G-
like it's not around the corner. It's
Okay. Does he have his
many months.
GED?
No,
Okay.
no.
That's what he's really going to want to try to do right now, unless he's working full time.
No, he is really trying to do that. He
Good.
has some goals that are he wants to be a plumber.
Good for him.
And so to be a plumber, he has to have a GED.
He does.
GED.
And then you know what? Based on where they're at, plumbers make great money. I'm going to tell you. And let's even say he ended out somewhere in McHenry. I think MCC, is that McHenry Community College out there? They do have different what would you call that? Like vocational programs where he could really look into that field. And DCFS has another program called ETV. It's called Educational Training Vouchers. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there are times like specific trades like that, Philip, aren't really covered by financial aid. So the department, what's not covered by financial aid, the department will pay for the difference up until they're every year up until they're 26 years old.
When you say the department, what department?
DCFS.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's called Educational Training Vouchers, ETV funds. Sherry, that's going to be in my pack of flyers I'm going to send you.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've mentioned a couple times about programs that they can be in until they're 26 years old. Do they need to be involved in these programs before their case closes?
Great question. Now, back probably about 5 years ago, they had to use ETV funds once before they turned 21 to use them later, but that's not the case anymore. So you could decide when you're 25, you want to go to school and you can access these funds.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to need to know about it before
when
they
it comes
have
to
no
youth
more
in
case.
college, when it comes to youth in college, you have to be accepted. You have to be enrolled the day before you turn. Everything has to be dotted and I'd and crossed. You have to be accepted the day before you turn 21.
I know one of the things I encourage CASAs to do is to work with kids through the Casey Life Skills Assessment. Start some of those conversations. Can you tell me how that kind of, is that a good suggestion? What's your thoughts about that, et cetera? Maybe explain it first.
Oh, the Casey Life Skills?
Yeah.
Okay. So they brought the Casey Life Skills training probably out about 15 years ago. And we all went through this training on administering it, right? And the tool was great because back in the day when it was in foster care, we would because I used to run a foster care program before independent living, is we would have the kid rate themselves. We would have the foster mom rate them. And then we would have the caseworker rate them and just kind of have a conversation in regards to why it looked differently for everyone, right? And, Casey Life Skills is just kind of supposed to give you a judge of where they are and then what areas to focus on. It's a domain. I can't remember who started it. We have to do it I still do it with my young adults every 6 months. Now, you're supposed to have, with the older adults, you're supposed to have the young adult assess themselves, but I don't find that very helpful because they just say that, so you're asked a question. I know how to find auto insurance. Somewhat yes, yes. You know what I mean? And there's a scale. My kids just don't even read the thing anymore and just hit strongly agree, all the way down. So, but if you could sit down and do it one-on-one and have a conversation with them, I think it's a great learning tool.
Great.
Do you have the tool? Do you need that?
No, I have it.
Okay.
I've done the training as well. So
okay.
I know that, it's definitely a great conversation piece to talk about, it talks about job skills training and it talks about everyday living, all of these different areas that even as a CASA, I think it's great to walk through because sometimes as a CASA, I don't remember, oh yeah, we got to talk about that skill. It's just something I learned because I grew up in a 2-parent household.
Exactly my point. And it's just, I had a conversation with one of my workers the other day, and it's like what we take for granted when it comes to what we know and don't know. Like, for example, we had a young man who lost his job for being late so many times. And he didn't really realize that 9 isn't 9-10. You know what I mean? Just because, that's what my mom always did. You know what I mean? So, and he lost his job, and it's something that no one ever had a conversation with him about. And it was really sad to me. So we really do take advantage of what we know because it was something that we observed, and it's not knowledge you're born with. So that's a really good point, Sherry. And I think it's a good tool to start off with in the very beginning because we have some kids who are awesome at budgeting, but when it comes to unhealthy relationships, it's not great. Yeah. So we should know to focus a lot of our conversations with them and all of our interventions on healthy relationships. I think it's a great idea.
So then you also work on some of those kinds of things like healthy relationships and getting them the right resources for that. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've talked a lot about really tangible things. in
Oh,
terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
housing and things
No,
like
because we
that.
go, so we have, our assessment period is about 30 days when we get them. And so we have a big intake packet, and Ansel Casey is one of them. We have another life skills assessment that we do with our young adults. And it's when we look at the scores, it's really supposed to help us know where, if I'm going to work with you, maybe I'm working with you on, wow, that money management is not great. But then maybe when it comes to working with Susie, it's like, she's pretty solid on her money, but some of these choices she's making, we need to focus on that with her instead. So our services are really individually driven based on their needs and what they want,
Yeah.
But if they don't want to talk about healthy relationships and we know it's a problem, I always tell them, I'm so sorry. That's not one of your choices. So sorry.
Oh, dear. It's funny.
Yeah.
All right. What else do we have out there, my friends?
This is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Tracy.
Oh, Mark, your sound went way down. We heard this is Mark and then just tiny words.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. I heard now.
All right. I've got a case where the individual is likely to be out of the system before the age of 18. Are there any way that this individual would be able to benefit from the program at a later date?
Out of the system? Like, why are they going to be out under 18?
Probably before the end of the summer. They're going to be 16 and almost 17 years old. So, and their case will be discharged by the end of probably by the end of the third quarter.
Are they returning home?
The preference, if I listen to my case, would be no, they don't want to live where they're living, which is at home.
Okay, but the case is that the reason he won't be in the system anymore is because he's going back to mom.
Well, he is currently on a short leash at his natural father's. So
Okay. So it's a return home goal.
right.
Well, I do want you to keep at your fingertips that there's another resource for young adults that if they left the system before 21 and want to come back in for services, there is a program for that. And that is through the DCFS Youth Advocacy Hotline.
Okay.
I can, Sherry, if you need that too, I can look that up for you. It is a really good resource because a lot of times they can come back in, but they would have to go through all the right steps, and it would be the first stop there. The most troubling part about that program, I find, is that when they can't come back in is when their case was closed to do guardianship or adoption. And the sad part in the world is I really unfortunately run across a lot of cases that once these kids turn 18 years old in one day, and the caregiver or auntie is no longer getting payment, these kids have no place to go. And I'm really advocating with DCFS to be like, we have these other kids that can come back in, but if they went home under guardianship or adoption, they cannot come back into care. And that doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
But that is, Mark, that is an option for your kid.
All right. That's good to know.
And then I also wanted to, can I ask you a question? What town does he live in?
He lives in
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you.
McHenry, so he lives in Lakemore is the town that he's in.
He's in
Lakemore?
Lakemore, okay.
So it's on the edge of Lake and McHenry.
Right, like in McHenry, right there. I had a young lady in there too. Because I was trying to think of a specific resource, because you know what might be something good for him is and I don't know if they have anything like that in McHenry though. I was thinking of like where someone could kind of just still have their eyes on him a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a mentorship program or I'm gonna give that a think.
Getting some of those services now. It's just they're just now getting set up. So he's getting some of those services, and I'm not sure if that will become a subject. but it's good to know. Like I said, it's the court date is coming up. And it's likely that the case will be closed on that last date, which is a couple months out, so.
Okay, okay.
So I want to ask you about that youth advocacy hotline and return to care thing a little bit more.
Sure.
I've run across a couple different times where a kid has said, I'm done, I want out, I close my case.
Yep.
Are those the kind that are eligible to come back in?
Mhm.
So they've left under independence or emancipation and they just said, I don't even want to talk to you guys anymore.
Correct.
Okay,
I
maybe.
mean, but it
should-
has to be before they're 21.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I need that number.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to find
Yeah,
it for you
please.
in a second. It's a good reason. And you know what? Unless you have that experience, you just don't even know that it's out there. Because otherwise you're like, oh my God, sweetie, I am so sorry.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest. Part of me is like, that's the hammer I might use with a child saying, listen, look at all of this money you're leaving on the table if you say I'm done. And you don't get to come back and choose that if you decide to change your mind. But maybe they do.
Well, I do also want to tell you guys real quick about another program. And so DCFS also has recently gotten some vouchers, and they're called housing vouchers. And they are FYI vouchers, and they're for youth. They're for youth exiting care. It's like a Section 8 voucher, but instead of being like a FUP, are you familiar with FUP, Sherry?
Nope.
Okay, so let me back up. So there, in every county, there's usually a housing authority. There's a McHenry Housing Authority. There's a Lake County Housing Authority, Waukegan, et cetera, et cetera. And every quarter, each of these housing authorities will work with DCFS and set aside a certain percentage of their vouchers for DCFS. Okay. And so let me first start talking about what a FUP voucher is. It's called a Family Unification Program, but it goes as an FUP. And so those vouchers are for when we have a mom that's working towards getting her kids back, but the only thing she's struggling with is housing.
Okay.
And housing can't be the only, based on statutes, housing cannot be the only thing that keeps kids from going to their parents, because we can't keep our kids from their parents because they can't afford them, right? So what they have are these FUP vouchers. And so the caseworker can apply for a housing voucher for their family. And so basically they should pay based on their income, their monthly rent. So that's called a FUP voucher.
Is that possibly called Norman funding in
It
McKenna?
is through the Norming funding program.
It is the
That's
same.
where you
thing.
apply
Okay.
for it. You apply for it through like the Norman funding program.
Okay.
And that came from a lawsuit from Norman, who sued DCFS because he couldn't get his kids back. They said he couldn't get his kids back because he was too poor, and he won, and now he has a program named after him.
Excellent. I don't
That's
know
how it always works with the
money to
department.
do the suit, but okay.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, you guys. That's a good. I didn't even think about that. So a very similar voucher that came out, and this is a newer one, and it's called FYI. And it's very similar to an FUP voucher, but it's for youth.
Okay.
So, Mark, even when you're talking about your young adult, even though he's only 16 right now, he was a youth in care, okay?
Right.
So at any point in time that he was a youth in care, he can apply at a certain age for this voucher.
Okay.
Okay. And so Sherry, this also, you're thinking about your young adults who are like, I'm done, I'm out of here. You know, I think you could have the caseworker, if they're 18 years old, you could ask to see if you can get them a housing voucher.
Okay.
So they're not going to be homeless. And
What does a child do if their caseworker no longer exists? You know, I mean, caseworkers come and go.
I don't know, my kids, they're 32 and still have my cell phone number.
Yeah.
That's sad.
That's great.
No, you have theirs, so.
Yeah, well, that's the someone called me yesterday and I was like, how did you find me? That's a good question. They're pretty resourceful, actually, a lot of these kids.
All right. If they start with a youth hotline call, will that
Yep.
help them get into the system?
And they should be assigned someone that's going to be like, okay,
Okay,
Sherry, where do you live? Okay, so you're in Cook County. I need you to go do A, B, C, D, and E.
okay. All right.
You know what might be a good person to come do a presentation for you is I have 2 presenters through DCFS that can talk about Norman funding and
Okay.
all the financial resources available for your families. And she does a great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I'll email you her info.
And I know in court, a lot of times CASAs, I have heard, oh, get them set up with Norman funding, this or that. And it's kind of like, okay, I think that has to do with housing and money and stuff. And but you know, we'll hear the attorneys throw that term around a lot. And so we can explore what that actually means, because that's not just the older kids, that's for families.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's a gentleman who works at the department by the name of John Egan, and he runs that program,
Yes.
but he has staffed it out a little bit. But they will, it might be helpful to do some type of presentation on that. So then you can even, if you, knowledge is power, right?
Agreed.
So if you have a caseworker, you could be like, okay, it seems like mom's struggling like this. As a CASA, be like, you know, it might be a good idea to get him some Norman funds.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll get you that too.
Thank you. Oh, Tracy, you have been a phenomenal wealth of information. I know you're like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can talk for an hour, but
and I did. Oh my God, I'm embarrassed.
No, this has been, I have lots of notes. All right. So CASAs, I appreciate it, all of your time and your questions. We are going to let you go and say thank you, Tracy. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.